Hi, Brian Ference here. You can follow me on X at BrianFerence1 or on Truth Social at Brian Ference or on Gab at BrianFE. Please do follow on Rumble. This is the MAGAMind podcast, magamindpodcast.com. With me is Toni Shuppe from Audit the Vote PA. How are you, Toni?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for coming back on the show. We're going to be talking about Scott Presler. Before we do, let me just do this real quick intro here. It's just going to be 23-second or 20-second clip. Here we go.
MAGAMind, no loss, no shame. Tore through the fire to stake my claim. I faced the worst and left it behind. Now they scream the name MAGAMind. MAGAMind, no loss, no shame.
All right. There we go, and we are back. So I want to jump right into it. Let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to switch to solo mode so it's a little bit better. Are you able to see my screen there?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Scott Presler's post. He posted this on June 3rd, and what he's saying here is, his typical humble brag. It's after midnight. Oh, I'm working so hard. I'm spending my time putting together a presentation on early voting, which is a huge scam. In Pennsylvania's 10th congressional district, Scott Perry won by 5,133 votes. 42,001 of his votes came from early/mail-in voting. So he combines two different things right there. The data, he's saying the data speaks for itself, and he shows this graphic. So he's showing that Scott Perry won by a margin of, 4,100 votes, and then let's see, this is showing the breakdown of election day votes and mail-in votes. He's saying Scott Perry won by 5,133. Not sure if his math is right there. Oh, I guess it is. Sorry, my math was wrong. 42,001 of Perry's votes came from mail-in voting. Early voting helped keep this seat. So I know you posted a response post to this. I'm going to go ahead and share that, but do you want to address that first and talk to it a little bit?
Sure. So I just actually put out a Substack article that goes into a little more depth. I released it at noon. So if you want
send me that link. Do you want me to show that instead?
Yeah, hang on. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Either one. It just has more
I
stuff
can share that on the screen for the viewers also. I'll put that link up.
All right, hopefully this one doesn't tell you, hey, you need to sign in. Let's see.
Usually with Substack, it says you can sign in, but
you can still see it if
there's
not.
a way to bypass it. All right, so let me put that link in, and then I will share this to our viewers.
Yay!
Okay, yeah, this is it, right?
Yep.
So let me just add this banner here. This is your Substack. Let's put it on the bottom of the screen, and I'll show it. All right. So it's tonishuppe.substack.com. And then specifically, this is your post on election integrity versus early voting. You just kind of guide me through this. I can scroll however you want, and you can just talk to it.
Yep. So the same thing, it just sets it up. I set it up by saying his claim. And in Pennsylvania, we are growing more and more concerned every day about this because he is meeting with our state GOP, the entire state GOP, to include every county chair and state committee person. They meet 4 times a year, and this is their summer meeting. And he's invited to do a voter registration training and basically push this on our entire state GOP. And so we are very concerned that this is, if they don't give us a seat at the table, which it sounds like they may. I spoke to the chair last weekend. He's open to having me in Harrisburg, which we're working on making that happen. I would love to get Brandon to come with me, Brandon Strock, and to implement the walkaway, what walkaway is doing, because I feel like that's going to produce better lasting change in Pennsylvania. But at any rate, yeah, so this is his post. He's what it appears to me he's doing, because this isn't the only one he did this week. He did it with McCormick's race as well, is he's putting together his sales pitch of why early voting is the way to go. He's not really looking at it from a more of an engineering data perspective. You know, my data guy, Vico Bertoli, and I are both engineers. We're very analytical. We're not necessarily trying to push a narrative that they're stealing elections. We know that there's problems. Everybody knows there's problems. We're trying to figure out what the problems are and what is the way forward. How do we get to secure elections? And so we're okay analyzing our work and saying something, oh, wait, maybe we were wrong about this or wrong about that. It appears, however, that Presler is more interested in a sales pitch, unfortunately. And so he's claiming this graph is similar to the one we put out with the Lancaster race in that it shows the mail ballots and the distribution of votes that came directly from mail ballots, which in Pennsylvania, the only way to vote early is if you fill in a mail ballot. And so the Democrat candidate, once again, this is the same trend we saw in the Lancaster special election. The Democrat candidate got the dark blue line those are her total votes from the mail ballots. And we can track that specifically because they're counted at a centralized tabulation facility. So they're counted separately from in-person votes. And so there's no wondering if this is what it actually is. This is how they count the votes. So from the mail-in ballots, the Democrat got more votes than Democrat voters returned ballots, which is what that middle line is. And then the light blue line all the way to the left shows you how many Democrat ballots went out to registered voters. And I've gotten this question since we put this information out there is, well, how do you know that? Well, because you're registered by party. And when you get your ballot in Pennsylvania, especially in a primary, when we get the voter rolls, you can tell who's a Democrat, who's a Republican if they got a mail ballot. So a certain number of Democrats request ballots. Always less end up going out for whatever reason, but the dark blue line shows the same trend. Janelle Stelson, the Democrat candidate, got more votes than ballots that were returned. By contrast, Scott Perry, now his rates are a little better, you can see. Like the middle blue line, he's got a better return rate than Janelle did, slightly, but his vote count the trend is still going down. He literally lost 3,000 Republican votes from the mail ballots, quote unquote, early voting. So, all right, which goes with our trend of not Republicans who vote by mail. The trend is showing, and this is, by the way, if you think this is legitimate and there's no ballot stuffing and no electronic manipulation and everything's on the up and up, which that's a whole separate topic. Let's just assume the system is fair. It's showing that the trend for Republicans who return mail ballots don't all vote for their candidate. But the Democrats are getting votes from the independents and unaffiliateds and the Republicans. And what's most concerning, I think, is that third party. So look at that third party line. Literally no votes went to the third. There was no third party candidate in this case, which is why there's no votes for the third party candidate. But if you look at the numbers, how did Stelson get more? How is that blue line way higher? Well, it came from the 3,000 Republicans that didn't vote for Scott Perry and the 15,000 people who requested, the independents who requested mail ballots. Literally every single one had to have gone to Janelle Stelson, which makes 0 sense. And nobody's asking that question. How is it possible that every single independent, not one, voted for Scott Perry?
No, that's a great point. And let me interrupt you just for a second. So, I mean, for me, when I look at this, it's very concerning because not only does it disprove what Scott Presler is saying, but it's actually, it looks to me like if they ramp up early voting and mail-in voting more, that's going to directly cause the Republican to lose in future because it's looking like this early voting, mail-in voting, it's really helping the Democrat a lot. And if they ramp up that more, then next time the Republican's going to lose.
That is the number one concern, exactly, that this is going to take the Republicans right off a cliff, because how is more of this a winning strategy? And so that's what I go on to cover in the rest of the article. I just explained everything. Keep scrolling down. It was actually his election day turnout that saved the seat. And I will also point out, too, being on the ground in Pennsylvania, that particular seat has been trending. The Democrats are after that area in Lancaster. It's in Lancaster County. It's in a conservative area, but it's been trending more blue. And again, that's, of course, if you think that the system isn't rigged and there's no other manipulation going on, which I would tend to be on the other side of that. the district itself, looking at the numbers, is going more blue. And so this particular seat is in jeopardy. And if he pushes his early voting in this particular seat, we're going to be in really big trouble, which is why I wrote the article and we're trying to get some attention on it. So we take after I spoke to the GOP chair, our position, a smarter strategy, what I'm calling, after I spoke to the state chair and other county chairs, unfortunately, because the mainstream media has painted us out at the vote as lunatic conspiracy theorists. I have relationships with some of the county chairs and good relationships with people on the ground, but they're still kind of buying into this because of Presler's massive victory lap across the state, saying he won 2020, and a lot of the media, or because of his efforts, we won 2024. Sorry.
Which is completely false.
They're unfortunately, as a county chair, you're very busy. You have an awful lot going on. Certainly as the state party chair, you don't really have time to get into the weeds in this stuff. And so I'm working really hard to get a seat at the table to try to explain this to them, that there is a better strategy forward. And the biggest criticism that I get is, well, Toni, the mail-in ballots, were stuck with them, Act 77. We can't just ignore them. We have to play the game. We have to beat the Dems at their own game.
That didn't work in Lancaster County in the Senate race, did it?
No, not at all. And we have clearly shown that President Trump didn't win 2024 due to early voting or mail ballots. That is as plain as day. And thankfully, since that's come out, Presler has stopped claiming victory. Early voting gave Trump the win, because there's no disputing in the numbers. That's not what did it. But instead, he's trying to claim that it gave McCormick the Senate seat, which most conservatives aren't super excited about McCormick anyway, but another separate topic for another day.
Right.
A more balanced strategy. So how do we deal with these mail-in ballots that we're stuck with? So what we're suggesting that makes the most sense is that we take it one election cycle at a time. And whatever campaign or race you're working on, you need to take, when anybody goes to win an election, you look at how many voters do we have in the district? Where's the propensity fall? How many are super voters? How many are low propensity super voters, meaning they come out every election, they never miss one. And then you formulate a plan based on how many votes do I actually need to win this election? And they usually say it's 2 or 3% higher than the average of the previous elections. When you look at that same election cycle, go back 2, 3, sometimes 4 cycles, and then you say we need to get 3% higher than the average of these 3 or 4. So it makes sense then to get the list out of people that are getting a mail ballot in their hand, Republicans, and now definitely independents, because apparently, again, assuming the system isn't rigged, not a single independent is voting or the Republican side, or very few. Mm-hmm. So why not focus on those folks, because you know that they have a ballot in their hand. And so, yeah, it makes sense, of course, to increase turnout, to get to whatever percentage you're looking at. Look at the people that have ballots in hand already, because they're going to vote, and chase them. As much as I hate to say that, we are stuck with the law. So I think it makes sense, at least, to look at it from that angle. But then, based on that number, and you'll know this 50 days before the election, because that's when the early voting, quote unquote, starts in Pennsylvania. That's publicly available data that any campaign or can request and get. How many ballots are going to go out. Then you can back out and see, what does the in-person turnout have to look like on said election in order for us to get to the percentage that we need and win, and focus on that in-person turnout. That is our as much as it is a little bit of a compromise, understanding we have to work with this horrific law, but not going hook, line, and sinker. Presler early vote action. He is clearly out to prove, if you will, that voting early is the winning strategy for the entire country of the MAGA movement and the Republican Party. And everything that we've done for the last 5 years shows the total opposite. And he's just not looking at it from a analytical, what I call engineering, just because Vico and I are engineers and we're very, very data driven and analytical in the way that we think. He's not looking at it from that aspect. He's only looking at it from a sales pitch. And it is very, very, very concerning. So thank you for having me on so that we could bring some attention to this.
Well, no, and I appreciate that. And your strategy sounds far superior. I mean, Scott Presler's strategy is already proven to have failed in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. To a certain extent, that strategy was employed by Turning Point in Arizona in the 2022 election. That also failed. Clearly in Arizona, which is Turning Point's home state, we have a Democrat governor, Democrat senators, Democrat secretary of state, Democrat attorney general. So clearly those strategies don't work. They aren't effective. The proof is, I guess, right there in the data. I do want to talk about one other thing. Since you mentioned fraud a little bit, let me share this article. This is something that was just put out. I'm not sure if you had a chance to review this. Let's see. Let me make sure I'm on solo view. Okay, so this is alleged fraud discovered in Arizona, 7 other states. It put out June 4th, but the Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose announced on Tuesday that he had discovered and submitted evidence of voter fraud in multiple states, including Arizona, and there's 11 individuals who voted in 7 states. So they voted multiple times in 7 states, including Arizona. It doesn't have Pennsylvania in there, but you can imagine this is from the Secretary of State of Ohio. This is documented evidence. It's been sent to the attorney generals. These are individuals that are clearly committing fraud, registration fraud. They're likely voting by mail, and they're doing it in 7 states, voting multiple times. It has all the links and all the evidence. Anyways, did you hear about that story at all, Toni?
I heard about it. I didn't do a deep dive. I can speak to that though, because I will tell you that we found 250 voters from 2024 in Pennsylvania who also voted in another state. I don't know the landscape of how many different states, where they all are. We get a lot in Pennsylvania of Florida and Pennsylvania double voters, and I think that's due to the snowbird phenomenon that takes. I don't think in a lot of cases the person knows that they're voting twice. I do think that it is fraud. Somebody somewhere is stuffing ballots and trying to figure out where the individual is not going to vote and cast a vote in their name for both states. I've knocked doors and actually spoke. This was years ago. We were looking from the 2020 election. I met people in my area that they moved to Pennsylvania. They no longer lived in Florida, but they had a ballot cast in both states. And they said, I voted in Pennsylvania. I did not vote in Florida. And they signed an affidavit for me. And of course, we tried to run that up to the proper channels, and nothing happened. And it's clearly still happening. And so the fact that the Secretary of State of Ohio, my sources say, by the way, that he is not on our side. He plays politics and pretends to be on our side. But I also know that in early 2021, they hacked voting machines in real time for him during an election and tried to get him to pursue that further. And for whatever reason, he didn't. So he's not exactly on our side, but it's interesting that he's now acknowledging the fact that people are voting twice and bringing the idea of voter fraud to the forefront.
Right. And it just exposes more the vulnerability of the mail-in voting and how it's ripe with fraud and why it's such a bad idea. If you look at, your data and all the other data that shows that day of voting turnout is what really brings the victory. I mean, that's where the focus needs to be. And of course, cleaning up our election and limiting mail-in votes. I did want to talk about, there's one more thing you were mentioning, Scott Presler. He took this victory lap and he gets all these fluff pieces written about him. There was a famous one. I don't know if it was in the New York Times or New York Post or something. And it was all about, what is Scott Presler's, hair regime and how does he style his hair? I mean, talk about a puff piece. And, he's so amazing. He wins elections for everyone. I mean, you have to look at that. When the media is just literally like fawning over someone, the mainstream media, they're fawning over someone. They're claiming, oh, they're amazing. They win elections. The opposite is true. I mean, the opposite is true. But I do think that the worm is starting to turn a little bit. And there's one article that I want to share. This is from The Bulwark. This was just posted on June 5th by Will Summer. And I mean, even the title, it kind of hints at this. It's like, MAGA world starts turning on Trump's star vote getter. So there's this claim that, Presler is the star vote getter, but it's saying MAGA world is starting to turn. And it has some really, really, I would call it a pretty fair, balanced article. It hits kind of both sides. but it talks about, Scott Presler's influence. He's got 2 million followers on X. It talks about his RNC, and Laura Trump almost hired him. But then it talks about kind of some of his seedy past on Craigslist, and of course, allegedly he engaged in sexual intercourse in the GOP office in Virginia Beach, and then posted it on Craigslist. This was with another man, of course. But then it talks about his PAC, and Elon Musk donated $1 million to his PAC. But of course, and it mentions the losses in Lancaster County and Wisconsin. And then it talks about that, unfortunately, he didn't respond to comment. It talks about Brendan Straka, his comment and his concerns. It mentions the realscottpresler.com website actually in here. Let's see. It talks about, the critics talking about, other than his personalities, it's pointing out that his claims are exaggerated. It actually has a quote from me in here, which is great. It says, Brian Ference, a conservative investigative reporter who has promoted the realscottpresler.com website, characterized it to me as proof that Presler has inflated his claims about the Amish numbers and dozens of other things. The Amish voting was completely inconsequential to the election results, Ference told me. And then Ference noted that while Presler has made much of the power of the Amish vote to deliver Pennsylvania for Trump, the state's main Amish county, Lancaster County, the increase was only 6,000 votes between 2020 and 2024. And of course, Trump won there in the past. Let's see. Even though Presler is describing it as monumental, earth-shattering, ground-shaking news, but really it's not. So it's interesting that he's starting to get some criticism now. This isn't necessarily mainstream media. They're, of course, still writing puff pieces for him, but we are starting to see, some data-based articles being written, looking at the claims, saying, are they actually true? Does the data show it? What are the results? And I hear there's another article coming out, this one in mainstream media. We'll see how that one looks. But any comments on that, Toni?
I just read it last night. I'll be honest, I haven't followed the Bulwark's work, so I don't really know much about it. But of course, he seems to take an objective approach. It doesn't look like he's trying to just go after Presler, but he is taking an objective approach, which I very much appreciate. And I'm looking forward to, I don't know, can we talk about the mainstream source?
Why don't you talk about it? Because I received the message from that reporter that the story is supposedly ready to go as long as his editor, he didn't say this, but as long as his editor doesn't kill it. So go ahead and talk about it.
So yeah, there's a Wall Street Journal reporter that's been reaching out to some of us who have posted things that counter Scott Presler's argument that early voting is a good idea. And I've specifically gone back and forth with him and sent him Substack articles and other information, even sent him some of the illicit info that we have online and said, maybe the mainstream wants to talk about this. I'm not sure why nobody is asking any questions about that. It's been completely buried. And so I'm really interested to see. I was going to ask you. I'm glad to know that it's done and it's coming out, and I hope that it is fair and balanced and forces. The most disturbing part, Brian, we've talked about this, is the fact that he just runs from any criticism. He blocks anybody that disagrees with him. He refuses to engage in anybody that, even if it's respectful and kind and like just kind of scratching your head, like, hey, maybe. Why do you think that every independent voter not one of them voted for the Republican candidate? He just won't take any type of questioning of his work whatsoever. He runs from, and that's concerning. And I don't know how a single conservative, even if I have spoken to people since all of this, especially since Brandon's video came out. I have spoken to people that are close to him and they call him a friend, that they're also objective minded though, and they're not 100% defending him. They're just like, okay, I agree, Toni, that like your concerns are legit. Have you thought about X, Y, and Z? So I'm not quite sure how much longer he's going to be able to run from this whole thing. And my hope with the Wall Street Journal article is it'll force him to at least confront some of this and not continue running with his tail between his legs like he appears to be doing.
Well, I hope so too, and I think you're right. And I mean, his behavior has kind of become increasingly erratic. He posted on X, I don't know if he's a fitness guru now. He's like, I've lost 28 pounds, and I mean, if you watch the videos that he's shooting, he just seems highly unstable. Is my take on it. I mean, that's one way to look at it. And some of these videos he's shooting, they appear to be getting more and more forced, more and more desperate. The fact that he's now, doing a sales pitch to try and prove why early voting works, whereas before everyone just took it as gospel without even asking any questions. I mean, that kind of shows that the narrative is turning. And I have heard allegations. Not only is basically all of Scott Presler's claims disproven and they're totally false and exaggerated, just everything factually. But I have heard allegations that this conservative superstar, his lifestyle is increasingly not conservative, increasingly not deserving of hero worship. And I have heard allegations. I don't have evidence of this at this time, but allegations of drug use, hard drug use, a continuing increased sexual promiscuity to really increasing levels. So if any viewers do have evidence of that, I am asking for them to come forward and share that evidence, because if someone is put forward as a hero to be worshipped in the conservative movement, let's just forget for a minute about his lifestyle choices in terms of homosexuality. But aside from that, if someone is truly living a degenerate, liberal, unethical, worldly lifestyle, that needs to be exposed, and that person no longer needs to be hero worshipped in the conservative movement, aside from his completely false claims, his strategies that don't work and in fact cause Republican losses.
So I've heard on the ground, I haven't heard the drug use. I don't have anything that would substantiate any of that, but I have connected with people that are close to him on both sides, quite frankly, though. Some that will say, they'll vouch for him in that he's doing good work. They think he's doing good work. At the same time, you will talk to, and this could be a hearsay, he said, she said battle, perhaps. But there are people that have worked closely with him that say it's very strange when he comes to do an event. There was a big fair before the 2024 election up in the northeast part of the state that he took a ton of pictures at and made it sound like he was saving the world there. And yet the folks that worked on the ground did all the work, worked 10, 12-hour days for an entire week at this event. And he showed up at the very end, for an hour or two photo op. Now, could he have been doing something productive somewhere else? Maybe. But for me, the most alarming thing is he won't answer any questions. He doesn't want to let's bring that stuff out. Let's bring that to the forefront so we can get to the truth. Just side note pivot. I don't know how you feel about the Elon Trump thing. I don't necessarily think it's bad, because we have to hold government officials accountable. And I love President Trump. I fully support President Trump. I love him madly, but he's in a governmental position that he needs held accountable. He can't be surrounded by yes men. And so I'm totally cool with Elon being critical. It's going to bring the truth out.
Well, that's true to a certain extent, but where's the evidence, Elon? You can't just make accusations with no evidence, and it doesn't make logical sense, because the Epstein files were in the possession of the Biden regime for a long time, and they certainly would have released evidence of Trump to force him to lose the presidential election, and they didn't. So it does not make any sense. So you're going to have to provide some evidence, Elon. I'm sorry.
No, I should have clarified. I still don't, for everything you said, and then some. Like, we know his name. We know they ran in circles together. They're both wealthy billionaires. Just rubbing shoulders with somebody at social events does not implicate you into massive sexual exploitation and trafficking. So I don't think that that's going to, but it remains to be seen. We'll wait until the data comes out. I think that was more Elon. My personal opinion is that Elon is, it's storming here. That was really,
okay. It's not explosions.
No. My personal opinion is Elon got very frustrated with all the cuts that he worked really hard with his team to make all these cuts and find this fraud. And it appears as though in the bill, they're just spending it all and all of his work is going out the window. And I think that's causing him some frustration. But I don't think that President Trump is implicated in the Epstein saga, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And I agree that, government is always corrupt, and it's a machine that's very difficult to stop. I do think also that Pam Bondi is useless and is doing nothing and should be fired.
She wasn't his first pick. Think about that too. She was not.
Yeah,
the first
that's a good point. Her history is pretty shady also. Anyways, I've talked about that before on the show, but we'll see. But I mean, Elon, you got to have some evidence, buddy, because can't just I mean, Elon said stuff before that's been wrong. Elon said stuff before that's been like erratic. So, I mean, what's going on there? Maybe it's a strategy. I've heard people saying, "Oh, it's a strategy, blah blah blah." We'll see. We'll see if it is, but I don't know. When you accuse someone of being on Epstein Island, if it turns out it's not true, I don't know how you come back from that. So, I hope he's thought about that a little bit.
Or that his, just again, yes, there's pictures of them, which nowadays with AI and photoshopping, how do we know any pictures are legitimate? But
that's true, yeah.
You could take a picture. You could be at a party with someone and them snap a picture. It doesn't mean if that person is involved in some type of scandalous thing that you are implicated with them.
And that was addressed, that they knew each other, in the past, but also something that's always left out is, Trump kicked Epstein out of his club allegedly because he was being creepy with young girls. So, when a billionaire walks up to you and gets introduced to you, I mean, you take that meeting usually, and it's only once you get to know them and you say, okay, this guy's a creep, and then you part ways with them. And that seems to be what happened. I haven't seen evidence that says otherwise. So
I should say that disclaimer, Brian, when I say that. I'm okay with criticizing the bill, the big, beautiful bill, but
I'm not a fan of, there's stuff in the bill like the 10-year moratorium on states making any laws against AI. I mean, that's a problem. That is a problem.
So yes, I should clarify. Moving forward, I will clarify. I'm okay with criticizing the bill, decisions he's made politically. I think he did go a little far with the Epstein files. Not sure what happened there.
Yeah, and I mean, everyone should be criticized, and you should be able to criticize Elon. But I posted an image on X. I don't know if I have time to show it real quick, and it was immediately censored by X. So talking about criticism. But apparently you can't criticize Elon, you can't criticize X because that gets censored. I don't know if I have it handy anyways, but if you go to my X profile, you'll see it, but it's hidden. It's a sensitive image, but basically it's just that, Elon is in trouble and Trump's, he's going to be a recipient of the Trump curse basically. But X immediately censored that like they do, any criticism of Elon. So you have to start to question things, just like Scott Presler. If you can't criticize, if you can't question, then there's a problem. And it looks like X is going that way with Elon, which is a real shame. So that has me a little bit more concerned than this, no evidence allegation against Trump. But, maybe it's true. I don't know. We'll see. I personally think one of the Supreme Court justices, the Chief Justice Roberts, is tied to Epstein files. And that's a lot of the problem. That's why the files aren't out. So that's my personal opinion. I don't have evidence of that, although I've seen allegations and supposedly a photo of Chief Justice Roberts, but I don't have verification of that.
Well, and then you've probably heard this too, Brian, that the way the deep state and the swamp works is to get somebody in a compromising position that doesn't necessarily even portray the truth. Mm-hmm. You take them for a couple of drinks or, heaven forbid, even drug them and then show them all tied up in some type of illicit scene and then use that against them. Say, if you don't want this public, then you'll play by our rules. And so it's a difficult thing to navigate, to know really what's real and what's true and what's not. And I'm just eyes wide open, man.
That's true.
Head on a swivel.
That's true. No, I agree. And Toni, great having you on the show. As always, we're going to have you back. We'll do another longer conversation. I do have another call coming in shortly here. But again, Toni Shuppe, why don't you plug your social media and your website?
Yes. So our organization, Audit the Vote PA, we're an election integrity watchdog organization. We've got a lot of irons in the fire and projects in the future to help secure Pennsylvania's elections. You can visit us on our website at auditthevotepa.com. We are at Audit the Vote PA on almost all social media except for Instagram, where we're at Audit the Vote Official. And yeah, appreciate your support. Like, follow, share our stuff, and help us get to the top of the algorithm so we can have a bigger presence and get a seat at the table here in Pennsylvania to stop the insanity of early voting.
Thank you, Toni, and for all the work you're doing. Again, I'm Brian Ference. You can follow me on X at Brian Ference1, on True Social at Brian Ference, on Gab at Brian FE. Follow me on Rumble, and this is the MAGAMind podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, search for MAGAMind Podcast or MAGAMindPodcast.com. Thanks again, Toni, and thanks to all my viewers, and God bless.